Welcome to all of you. This is Heart to Heart Candid Conversations. Now, this is a time of isolation, sheltering in place, and a time when many are pulling back from true social connection. Heart to Heart is an opportunity for us to get to know some of the people around us in a much more personal and human way. My name is Solarzar, and today I'll be speaking with Birgit Starmanns. Good to see you, Birgit.
Great to see you, Solarzar.
Let me share a little background. She was born in Germany, near Munich. Now, she can share the actual town name because I can't pronounce it. And she came to the U.S. at the age of 6.5, and she said she has stories, but I didn't know if that meant she was a stowaway on a tramp steamer or if she came with her family. But actually, her father was transferred here. She grew up in Southern Virginia, Williamsburg, Newport News area, and later moved to Northern Virginia, around the D.C. metropolitan area. But she didn't come to California until 1997 and decided that California was more like her than the East Coast. So Birgit, in your childhood environment, what do you consider the most important influence that helped role model the type of person you wanted to be and the type of life you wanted to build for yourself?
I would say that it might be cliche, but my role models were definitely my parents, because we were just this little microcosm unit of the three of us. I don't have any brothers and sisters, so it was me and my parents. And they raised me to be very independent. So I think that's really what helped me along the way. Of course, I looked to my mother for some things, my father for some other things. I like to joke that once I moved out of the house, if I wanted to have a logical conversation, I'd ask for Dad on the phone. If I needed to emotionally vent and repeat myself 10 million times, I would ask for my mother. But I would say they raised me to be very independent and not worry about what other people think. And I'll give you a great example. Yeah, you're growing up and people invite you to parties, etc. And, oh, so-and-so wants me to go here, and so-and-so wants me to go there, and so-and-so wants me to go there. And then my father would look at me and say, well, what do you want to do? Like, well, actually today I just want to stay home. I don't want to deal with anything. So I didn't do the classic, oh, you have to be in sports, you have to be a cheerleader. I quit cheerleading to do more dance. So they really raised me to make up my own mind and not worry about what other people say. And I think that's the most important lesson. And part of that is also, if you think about me speaking in German, I didn't know how to speak English when we came to the US, and I had a tutor and learned important things like monkey bars and teeter-totter for a 6.5-year-old. But my parents didn't want me to lose the language. So if something happened in school in English, I'd want to run home and tell that story in English. And my mother would turn around and say, I don't understand you. So then I tried Dad, and he said the same thing, because they wanted me to translate, no matter what language the story happened in. And that's helping me to this day. I work for a German company. So those are all just microcosmic examples of how they really taught me to be independent, not worry about what other people say. Doesn't mean that I can't go to other people for advice, but not to be driven by that, by other people's schedules for me.
So was there, outside of the language issue, were there other adjustments that you went through coming from Germany to the U.S. that you found? Certainly the language was a primary one, but what other things did you have to adjust to?
It's strange because everything was different. Even going to school, in Germany, you don't have a desk that's attached to a chair, right? You have normal tables and normal chairs. And we had two people per desk, right? And I was with a lefty, so we used to bump elbows until we changed places. We had different ways to carry pencils and pens. What is the school box thing? We had actually like this little zippered up, we call it Federmäppchen. Everything was different, right? Math was more advanced. I didn't understand this phonics upside down E, the schwa. What is that? I still don't understand that to this day. So the school timing was different, because in Germany you had more longer vacations throughout the year, and here we came over and it was still a time when there were 3.5-month summer vacations. So I would say a lot of things were different. And also the kind of things that I got into, because in Germany, I think I probably would have grown up more on the ski slopes, being so far in the south and close to the Alps. And here I had the opportunity to do things like dancing and go to the beach. So I would say the environment was different. The culture was different. We always celebrated Christmas Eve. Everybody here is all about Christmas Day. You name it, it was different. So you would walk into my parents' house and you would have like this little Germany, essentially. And then you walk back outside and you'd be in the US. So it was actually a very interesting way to grow up. And my mother used to call it being kind of a child of the world because it makes you comfortable in all sorts of different cultures, which is now great in California if you think about it that way.
Yeah, sure. You also mentioned the fact that you would do translations to your parents at home. Was your home language mostly German?
Yeah, and it was really that they wanted me to be able to translate my own words because my father was already here. And when you said transfer, just to be clear, it was not military. I think I always get asked that. So it was transferred from his company, and he knew how to speak English. My mother was going to English classes, and I had the tutor, but it was really that they wanted me to be able to translate. Because if you look at a lot of families, even nowadays, their kids are growing up, and they let them speak English at home, and they literally forget how to speak German. Because if you don't use it, then you lose it. And that's so true. I've seen kids that totally lost how to speak German, and they were maybe 12 when they moved over. And they lost the language completely. So it was really not translating something that happened for them, but to translate what I had just said into German to be able to do that, because it would have been really embarrassing to go back and not be able to speak to my grandparents on a visit. They don't speak English.
Well, you also mentioned your dad transferred non-military here. What did he do for a living? And did your mother work, or was she a homemaker?
My father started off as an engineer. If you think about the heavy construction equipment, dozers and loaders and excavators, and he designed a lot of that. The company's called Liebherr, and it's a competitor of Caterpillar. So all of those heavy construction equipment. And then when we moved to the States, we were initially going to move back to Germany after 2 to 3 years. That was one of the reasons that my parents really wanted me to keep the language. But my father got promoted, so he started running the service department, and then he went up to VP. It was fascinating to me because he continued his education, and he actually went to some college courses about marketing. Being in marketing, you need to know what it is you're marketing. So somebody would call him about a machine that he had literally designed 20, 30 years ago, and they had an issue. He just remembered everything. I was always so impressed at how well versed he was and how well he knew the things that he was actually marketing. And I think that's a philosophy that I've taken with me because I've done everything from consulting to marketing. And in my company now, and I'm in what's called a center of excellence, but I won't market something that I don't understand. And you asked about my mother, Solarzar. So she did not work at the beginning. She was not allowed to. She didn't have a visa. So by the time that my father remembered that we needed a green card for me to work when I was 18, by that time, I think she was just happy being at home. She designed all my clothing. So I grew up very spoiled. Everything fit me to a T. Everything was absolutely perfect. So that's why even when I go shopping to this day, well, this is just a little bit too wide here. And because I grew up with having everything really down to a T fitted for me. So I was very spoiled that way. So she took her education essentially, and she actually worked in Germany, and she was designing clothing at one of these high-end boutiques. And I got the benefit of that in the US.
You also mentioned you went to William and Mary College in Williamsburg, Virginia, and you majored in English German, and you also did a little bit of a minor in psychology. And what were you thinking in terms of career at that time? What did you have in mind that you wanted to do with that mix of things?
Initially, it was going to be English because I wanted to be a journalist, actually. And we didn't have a journalism program per se, so I did what everybody else did, is major in English and work on the school newspaper. Okay. The major in German came about because I was living in the dorms, and I did not want to forget how to speak German. So then I was taking all these 400 level classes, and it occurred to me that if I just take a couple of 300 level classes, I could fulfill the requirements for a second major. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because I grew up with German grammar. When I was a kid, actually, my mother had my grandmother, send over German grammar books. And I was bribed in the summers, 5 cents a page, later on 10 cents or 15 cents to actually work through the German grammar books. But I'd never actually had that formally. So I went to one of these grammar courses in the German program at William & Mary. And they kicked me out. They kicked me out of the class because they said they're concentrating on conversation and I already know how to speak. I'm going to intimidate other people. I just said, I just want to make sure I understand why this grammar sounds correct.
So then you mentioned you went through a variety of careers leading up to the present time today. You even mentioned your dance, which you were very involved in dance from a very early age, and it was something that's a real kind of passion. Dance led to one of your early jobs at Busch Gardens, didn't it?
The first year I was not old enough to audition because I wasn't 18 yet. I was a theater hostess. And because I wanted to eventually audition, so my job was actually to let people in and out in one of the theaters. But as an employee of Busch Gardens, that also allowed me to take classes from the choreography. So they actually got to know me. So then when I was old enough to audition, I basically danced for 5 seasons at Busch Gardens. So at the time they were open on weekends in the fall and the spring. They were open in the summer. And I did over 2,000 shows of, guess what? The German show. There were 2,000 people that could fit into the theater. So it was actually the largest venue, and we probably had the most shows. On a heavy day in the summer, we would have 11 shows, 5 or 6 shows a day. We would switch between morning and evening shifts. So I learned how to think on my feet on the street. I learned how to not worry if something happened on stage and how to fix it. You learn how to figure things out when things happen on stage. So that was something that I always appreciated learning. And as you know, now I compete in ballroom, which is
6 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, had you ever considered dance as a professional career or as your profession?
I actually considered going to New York and doing the audition route. I think my parents were worried that I was going to be this starving artist living on the streets of New York. So my father said, if you go to grad school now, I'll pay for it. So yeah, here, twist my arm. I actually ended up with an MBA. And even then, when I first went into consulting, I always had a pair of tap and jazz shoes with me wherever I went. So I continued dancing throughout.
So
my
what
entire
led
life.
you 6 years ago to get into competitive ballroom dancing? What was the choice there or the decision?
I had a partner in the Fest House who was actually a ballroom dancer, and he had hooked me up with some group lessons. And they pulled me aside, this was college, and they said, oh, you're really good, you could compete. And then they sat my parents down to explain what it would cost. And my dad, you should have just seen his face. He's like, you're kidding, right? I didn't have the budget. And I was trying to rediscover dance a while ago after being off of it for a few years. And I was fascinated with it. Dancing with the Stars, quite frankly, was big on TV again. And then I found my current instructor, David, and I've been dancing with him for 5 years now, and he is amazing. And whereas growing up with tap and jazz, you just need to make sure you're in the right formation, but you're kind of on your own. Partner dancing is a whole different thing, and it's definitely a passion. If I won the lottery tomorrow, that's what I'd do.
So in your current company, are you working with German companies?
I use German every single day. So I am now really super thankful that my parents made me jump through those hoops to the point where just speaking and even thinking in 2 different languages became normal. I was getting good scores when I spoke at conferences already, but I wanted to get better at impromptu speaking. I can present with PowerPoints till the cows come home. That's easy. But to do it without the PowerPoint and to be able to just say, really use best practices and say, I'm only going to put a couple of words up there, but I'm really going to flesh out the speech without having to use notes, without having to memorize, without having to read things off. I actually tried to make sure that I would do things a bit more in an impromptu fashion because that's what I was trying to learn.
That's fine. And of course, we won't tell anybody, so nobody will know. So how did your experience in Toastmasters shift your approach to life or your interaction with other people? Did it create any shifts, or did you find you brought more into it than you got from it?
The way that I speak is actually very, I think, more common at work in business contexts. And actually, you mentioned that I'm doing a podcast right now. I mean, there's no way I could memorize or read that and make it sound good. So I think it's really helping me to develop some additional skills. And then I love the ability to give back. So the whole public relations, being able to coach people on what to say, sometimes what not to say, being able to help people out with that and mentor them, I think that's very helpful too. So I would say you get into it, you get out of it what you put into it.
But you also mentioned part of your philosophy of life is having a positive mindset. You feel that the mind can direct us anywhere. Has that been a constant through your life, or has that been more of an evolved philosophy you developed?
I think it's been constant. I was always glass half full type of person, always more on the happy side, not really wanting to deal with negative things. I mean, obviously in life, sometimes you're forced to, and I would say that puts that philosophy to the test with me with some medical situations. But I do believe that having a positive mindset really helps affect your body and how well you're going to come through whatever that situation is.
So do you want to talk about your medical situation that you experienced and went through and how you came through it?
Sure. So the first one was about 12 years ago, and I'm a breast cancer survivor. And I found out I found a lump myself, and I found out literally on the way into a club meeting on a Sunday afternoon. The doctor had called me, and I was, quite frankly, freaking out. But it helped me focus on something other than what I was going through. So I really have to credit my Toastmasters family. And this was right around the time that I started dancing ballroom or exploring it. And it really helped me heal. But I tried not to think of anything negative. My surgeon said, don't go looking at the internet. You're going to find a form of breast cancer that has you dead in 3 weeks. That's not what you have. So trusting my doctors, I had a great team, and really just looking beyond the treatment. So one of my friends would come over and with a bottle of wine after the Friday after every chemo, and we'd be like, another one down. So I'm like, all right, 15% down, 87.5% down, right? Almost done. So I always thought of looking beyond what was going on. And the more recent end of 2019, I had meningitis, which I apparently picked up at a dance competition in Hawaii. And having a lot of time in rehab to read. Apparently, staph and meningitis is one of the top 10 dangers of Hawaii. So I just got unlucky. But after that, about a month and a half later, I was back in the hospital for open heart surgery. And that was very frightening. It explained why I didn't really feel myself for probably a good 2 years. I guess when the heart doesn't pump enough blood and oxygen to brains and muscles, I always felt tired, kind of lethargic, couldn't remember much. So I think there was something else going on because those two were really unrelated. But it was interesting because I woke up from that heart surgery. After meningitis, I still felt a little bit foggy. Obviously, it's an infection of the brain. But after heart surgery, I just felt really clear and focused. And 2020, let's go. Let's just go for it. And my body obviously had to get strength back. But I think my mind was super sharp and super focused. And who cares about COVID? I'm alive. So I have to stay home for a while. I've been working from home for 8 years. So and these are the kinds of thoughts that I would have. Not, oh no, I can't go out. It's like, hey, I can't go out. Neither can anybody else. All right, cool. Healing time.
Okay, so Birgit, having gone through all of that, especially the breast cancer, how do you go through or move on from that, maintaining that positivity in your life and yet looking forward, hopefully, to the future?
This is a story of a routine that David choreographed for me. When he heard about that and he realized I was still talking about it a lot, I hadn't let anybody at work know. So I had a few Toastmasters friends that knew. I had a few friends that knew personally, but I hadn't told anybody at work. I really wasn't public with it because I just didn't want this reputation of being this quote unquote sick person. And just to reach closure, David suggested that he choreograph a routine for me. And the routine is really my breast cancer journey, from discovering that I have it to going through treatment. He wrapped black material around my breast as part of the dance, and I'm trying to get away from it. And so there's this interplay with us, but it's always through this black material. The routine goes down on the ground and then comes back up, and the material is now pink. And this is a celebration of that I came past, and I'm about to cry. It was so heartfelt. And
that's all right. If you need to let the tears flow, that's so powerful. The imagery of that is so extraordinarily powerful. And it says a lot about you, about that positivity. It's not something you say, it's something you live. It's the person you are. You bring such a joy of life to everything you do and say and share. And that's what makes it a pleasure to know you. And you've been very big, I don't know if it comes from your marketing background, about doing outreach type of experiences within Toastmasters. Of course, you did Beta Bay, which some folks may not realize was a TV show, a Toastmaster TV show. Of course, you're doing your podcast now.
I'm glad you brought those up. Yeah, Stan and I were co-producers. Yeah, so we got 3 awards for that our last 3 years, so very proud of that. Podcast right now, we're on our 7th episode, so very proud of that.
You also mentioned you have a personal hobby of writing. You're working on memoirs, you do essays, you're doing nonfiction. Is that more of your exploration of Birgit, or is that something you hope really to bring to fruition in the world?
Both. Mm-hmm. I'm actually, interesting that you say that, because I'm actually taking some creative writing classes at Stanford. Because I am working on a memoir. There are a couple of other nonfiction books I want to write. I don't think I should be writing fiction, because first of all, truth is stranger than fiction. I'm not sure I'm good at making up a story, because too much reality kind of always creeps in anyway. So I want to make that interesting. I do a lot of writing at work. I do a lot of webinars, articles, videos, etc. And I'd like to write about some other things. So I've published some things about travel, some other personal essays. And I think it's the trend these days that people relate something that's happening to the world into how it affected them personally, and then it circles back to how it can help other people.
Well, I chose to dance with you a little bit today to get a better sense of who you are, besides who we know from Toastmasters. But at the same time, I'd like to know what you believe is the most important thing you've learned in your life, and how you apply that to your relationships as well as your interaction in Toastmasters.
One of the things that I grew up learning is how to be independent. But I think something I've learned especially lately is that it's okay to ask for help. Have your chosen family. My parents have both passed away, so right now it's pretty much just me. So my family is really my chosen family. My dance family, my personal family, my Toastmasters family. And I think a lot of times I was too nervous or insecure to ask for help and admit that I needed it, whether it's a medical thing or, hey, I'm totally being unorganized about something. I need help with, dealing with whatever it is. Or just, I tend to put too much on my plate and, okay, somebody needs to help me figure this out. Or, my desk is unorganized. I mean, from the very little to the very big, but being able to ask for help and advice, I think, is something that I've really come to learn a lot more lately.
Well, Birgit, I've got to thank you so much for taking your time to share these little insights into you today. And are there any final thoughts or words you would like to make sure people take away as the memory of Birgit Starmanns?
Always be positive. The mind is a very, very powerful thing. And I think the way that you look at the world really, quote unquote, clouds the way that you see it. But if it's with rose-colored glasses, that is a very good thing.
Well, blessings to you. And thank you so much for your time and for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Solarzar. It's so great talking with you today.